English-speaking church downtown, and through that church, I will touch the city, I will touch the nation. I could I literally have staked my life on that call. That call changed not only our lives and our direction, but has kept us here and allowed us to be all the things that God has allowed us to do and say. So it was the call. That He spoke to us unquestionably.
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt.
That's right. And you had a young wife, very young children. How did they take the news? How do they take the news? You just come home and you say, "So, Marilyn, well, did you do it over dinner? How did you do it?"
I would have never made it 41 years in Uganda if I didn't hear from Jesus myself.
Yes.
And if I didn't have my own call.
Yes. That's so important.
It's very important. When I married Gary, I also heard Jesus. Jesus speaks to people in different ways.
Yes.
People often say, who are you, Gary? You keep saying in your book, God spoke to me, Jesus told me to do this. Jesus speaks in different ways to different people. And sometimes he speaks through a still small voice. Sometimes he speaks with just a feeling. Sometimes he speaks through his word. That's often how he speaks to me. But I really felt, I just felt in my spirit, God say to me, you are to marry this man and you are to help him be everything that I want him to be. Wow. In other words, I felt God say, Gary Mark Skinner is your God assignment. And so, you were talking about dreams to destiny. Every destiny begins with a dream.
Yeah.
Every little girl has a dream of one day getting married, of being a mother, helping her husband. My dream was actually to marry a man of God who wanted to give his life in service to Jesus. So my God destiny was Gary. And so when Gary said, I want to go to Uganda, of course I wasn't too thrilled. I didn't want to come. But I had to get on my knees and I had to actually surrender what I had to the Lordship of Jesus all over again. Yeah. And I had to literally say, Lord, it's no longer going to be me that lives, but it's going to be you that lives in me. You see, because I love Jesus with all my heart. I've loved him since I was 6 years old. Yeah. Yes. And I wanted to please him. I had this desire to please him. I wanted to be his disciple. So amazing. So I said, yes, sir. When do we leave?
And you have that in common. Both of you gave your lives to Christ when you were 6. Is that right?
Both of us were very young.
Wow. So that's amazing. Yeah. I've heard you, Marilyn, speaking about the whole 6-year-old thing. Every time you had doubts, you would go back to that. 6 years. Remembering what you committed to when you were 6. So that's amazing to have that to stand on.
Yeah. I just wanted to add on to the issue of when you married Marilyn. Now you married, she was 18. You were 21?
21.
Yes, 21. What do you say in terms of marrying the right person? What would be your take on that?
I think if you are in love with Jesus and you genuinely say to him, I want what you want. Yeah. And I want to live my life your way. He will show you who to marry. And he has someone for every single person. And I remember when we got married, they put up a sign, better together than alone.
Nice.
And she has made me so much better, and I hope I've made her a little better too.
That story might be edited. I know. She has. But how did your dad take this? How did your friends?
Oh, daddy's girl.
Yes, your relatives and all. Now that you're moving to Uganda after the whole marriage.
Okay, I had the best father in the world. Gary was the first boy I had ever brought home. I'd never had a boyfriend in my life before. I'd never dated. And the first day I brought him home, he asked my father if I could marry him.
Wow.
My father was, he said, when are you expecting and hoping this event will take place? And Gary said, in June. This is January. And my father said, you mean June next year?
Next year.
No, June this year.
And my dad said, oh, no, that can't happen. It will have to be June next year.
Wow.
And I respected my dad. So we had already decided whatever my father said we were going to do. So we said, okay, that's fine. And we just went back and we prayed about it. About 3 weeks later, my father came to us and he pulled out his calendar and he said, June 1st sounds like a good day.
Woo!
Gary said, You mean June 1st next year? And my dad said, no. God woke me up in the middle of the night last night and said, let her marry him. Gary's a good man.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
So we were married 6 months later with my dad's blessing. But sadly, my father passed away 8 months after that. He was only 40 years of age. So my dad never lived to see that I actually came to Uganda and the wonderful things that God has done. Yeah. My mother was a widow. She found it very difficult to release me and her only 3 grandchild to a country where people were literally massacring each other.
That must have been really hard for her.
It was a tough one.
Yeah.
And I know that there is also another part of that with the Pentecostal Assemblies of Canada and all what that they had to talk about. But we're going to take a short break and we will still continue with our conversation. It's Pastor Gary and MARILYN in studio.
It's Power FM 104.1, all about love. And my name is Belinda. I'm here with Eki. And in the studio, we have Pastor Gary and MARILYN Skinner. We are talking about so many things. And I just want to say, as we get further into this story and get to the inception of Watoto Church, of KPC at the time, from one small group of 75 people in a hotel suite to 16 campuses around Uganda and one in Juba, South Sudan. It's an amazing story that we are unpacking this morning, and we get to hear more from Pastor Gary and Auntie MARILYN. But before we even get into the launching of the church, there was a whole process that had to go on with the Pentecostal Assemblies of God, right? Yeah. Before you actually headed to Uganda. And you did say that before that you were in Zambia, right, Pastor Gary? Could you tell us a little bit about that? How you got from Canada to Zambia, and then when you were in Zambia hearing the call to come to Uganda? We'd love to hear more about that from you.
Well, I was, as I said, born in Africa. I'm an African through and through. And even though I went to Canada to do Bible school and marry a beautiful Canadian girl, I knew I would come back to Africa. So after we pastored in Canada, 2 different churches, I asked to be given an opportunity to go back to Africa and pastor. And they sent me to Zambia. And it was good. We had 4 great years there, but it was while there, as I said, God spoke about Uganda, and I knew nothing about Uganda. So we were passing through Nairobi on the way back to Canada, and I said, let me go to Uganda and just see what it's like. And I drove. We had to drive. You couldn't fly in. The country was in such chaos. There were no planes coming into the airport. So we drove across, and I had my first church service in Kumi.
My village.
Really?
You were a popular village. District, yes.
And when Idi Amin was the president and he was persecuting the church, the little church used to go up into the rocks, and they would have church in the rocks so that when the army came, the church people could scatter and just... So we had church in the rocks. The birds were flitting in the trees, and I preached with a huge rock as my pulpit. Wow. And it was the most amazing service. And I felt this huge confirmation. Couldn't come to Kampala. It was too dangerous. Yes. So the Pentecostal Assemblies of Canada, when I said to them, we really need to go, they said, you can't go. It's too dangerous. We don't want your blood on our hands. And I struggled with God, and I thought, I'll just come on my own. And God said to me, no, I want you to submit to your leaders. Wow. 2 weeks later, they changed their mind and they said, you can go. And I was able to come and visit Kampala, drove into Kampala, broken city, completely destroyed, the middle of war. It was chaos. But I had this absolute assurance in my heart, this is where God wanted us to be. And the rest is history. It's just an amazing thing that God's done.
Wow. And Kampala Pentecostal Church was born in a hotel suite.
The Crystal Suite.
The Crystal Suite.
Which you say wasn't crystal and wasn't sweet.
And it wasn't imperial.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't sweet. We looked for 3 months to find a suitable location to begin the church. You know, we have core values at Watoto. They weren't just brought about 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Those were the core values that Gary and I have lived our life by. And, you know, one of them is excellence. And we could not find a place that we thought this is going to be an excellent place to start the church. Literally, there was one single 100-watt light bulb hanging. Actually, there were no light bulbs. When we went in, there were only bare wires hanging down from the wall. We had to go get our own light bulbs. When we left Canada, Gary said, now, Mary, we're on mission. On mission. And we only have a certain amount of things that we can bring with us in our luggage. So the clothes are going to be very small, but the sound system and a video projector are going to be very big. So we flew all the way from Canada with a sound system, with a video projector. And when we get to the Imperial Hotel, there were no sockets to even plug that sound system. There were just bare wires hanging out of the wall. So I tell the story. Gary showed me how to hotwire the sound system together. Put the red here, the green here, the brown there. Don't cross the two wires together or I may just be a widower. So we come to the Imperial Hotel April 22nd, 1984. I mean, they had a disco there the night before. There was vomit literally everywhere. Yeah. We didn't know anybody. This was the first church. So it was just Gary, me, and our 3 kids. We came in our work clothes, cleaned it all up. We had some chairs air freighted in from England because there weren't even any chairs to sit on.
Those are the grey small chairs that have lasted forever years.
They've lasted for 40 years.
You see,
they were excellent.
Yes, they were.
You see that, eh?
Yes.
And so we set the whole place up and 75 people showed up that very first service, and the most important person of all showed up, Belinda. Jesus. And we're worshiping him here today.
Yes.
Amen.
And when Jesus shows up, everything changes. People, cities, nations, the atmosphere changes when Jesus shows up. And so the atmosphere that was a disco the night before changed into a place where the presence of God was there, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
A place of worship. Wow.
Yeah. So you just went and invited people to church. Is that it?
Jimmy Swaggart was still doing his thing. Oh. And we put an advert
They probably don't know who Jimmy Swaggart is.
I do.
And we put an advert after him. And young people.
On TV.
We were specifically targeting young people. And we were going to be an English-only church. People said it won't work. You have to have Luganda. But God made it very plain English. And the point was to reach young people. And so Watoto Church, Kampala Pentecostal Church at the time, we specifically targeted young people. Young people started to come to the church. The music, the style of preaching, everything we did was for young people.
So we were blessed that we had been in a rock band, that we were musical.
Yes.
So we did the worship ourselves. Oh, yeah. Our kids, we had an overhead projector back then. There were no videos. We trained our oldest how to do the overhead projector. So Gary played the guitar and led worship. I played the keyboard, and I had a bass guitar that you played with your feet. So we had a guitar, a keyboard, and a bass guitar with your feet. I'm serious. Yeah.
Wow.
A whole band.
A whole band. Yeah. Band of 2.
And the way, Aki, that we actually attracted young people to church was during the week. We would go to schools, Budo, Gayaza, Makerere, high school, and we would ask the headmasters, hey, we do music. Could we come and do some music for your students?
God, these are 2 Wazungus who want to take
And the 2 of us would come and we would hold a little concert on our own, the 2 of us, and then we would speak, and that's how we actually gathered young people to come to church on Sundays.
That's powerful. Pastor Gary, I would like to, there's somebody who God has told to also, start a ministry in the church. What would you tell them, when they've been called, and the whole, I think in a few, just the preparation then to start, because
church is about us serving people. It's all about people. It's not about making a name or growing a big church or getting money. It's about serving people. Be a man of humility. Be a man of integrity. Preach the word of God. Love people. Serve people. And you just simply can't go wrong. It's not a show. It's not a presentation. It is about worshiping Jesus. He shows up, and it's his presence that makes all the difference. That's what I'd encourage them to do.
I think one of the important things that people who want to plant a church need to know is this is not a competition.
Yeah.
So true.
Every church is different. And you know what? God has a specific word for you as to how he specifically wants you to start that church. Yeah. We started small. And sometimes a younger generation, they want to start big. They want to start where Watoto is today.
That's
we want
important.
the screen.
That's huge. Yeah.
We want the lights. We want the band. And you know what they'll even do? Some pastors, because they want those things, will go and try to coach. They hire, pay more money to get them to come. Never despise the days of small beginnings.
Start with a bang. That's what they say. I like that. As we talk about the small beginnings, adversity was not missed in your whole journey. In fact, you've shared often stories that come across, and these stories, one can say, is like an action movie. That is thieves threatening to tear down your front door late at night, and that's when Pastor Gary was away. There were also several other incidences. Could you just share a little more on that?
Well, we'd only been in Uganda 3 months, and Gary was away in Kenya. I was all alone with our kids. They were 4, 6, and 8. And back then, gangs of thieves used to roam the streets at night. They were also known as the army, sadly. And they would literally go from house to house. They would rape, they would kill, they would steal. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and we had a man that he had a bow and arrow, and he walked around the house when Gary was there just to be alert. And he came to my window around 11 o'clock at night, and he said, "Mommy, they've cut your electricity." And that's what these gangs would do. They'd take the main transformers out so that whole areas were in complete darkness and nobody could see. Well, it happened all the time, so I didn't get too worried. About 30 minutes later, he came back and he said, "Mommy, they have come, and there are many of them." So I told him to run. I went, I got our kids. I don't know where I got the strength from, but I put our kids underneath our bed and I dragged furniture and I barricaded myself in the bedroom. And for 3 hours, I could hear those men. They were pounding on our door. They were knocking. I could hear them like run and try to break down this simple wooden door that I could have broken down myself. They're saying, "You open. We're going to kill you. We're going to shoot you. We're going to rape you." And I'm not going to tell you that I wasn't scared, Belinda. I was terrified. I had one thing on my mind. I cannot wait for the man of God to get home, because when he gets home, I'm going to give him a piece of my mind. And we talk about dreams. This wasn't a dream. It was a vision. I actually saw the car driving down the driveway and Gary was going to roll the window down and expect me to come and give him a big kiss, but that's not what I was going to do.
You're going to put your hands on your hips and say, "Yeah?
What kind of crazy man? You are Mulalu. I shall take you to Batabika right now." But I heard a voice. And that voice said, "Get up, girl. I did not bring you to Uganda to be paralyzed by fear," because that's what fear does. Fear paralyzes you and renders you impotent. I didn't bring you here to be paralyzed by fear. I brought you here for a purpose, and I had to make a choice. And I've come to realize you rarely know the significance of a choice that you make, but a choice well made can make all the difference.
That's true.
And I had to choose, was my fear going to be stronger than my faith? Or was my faith going to be stronger than my fear?
Yeah.
And I chose to believe that if Jesus could keep 25 men out of that door.
Exactly.
I honestly believe there was an angel on the other side of that door keeping them out. If he could keep those 25 men out of that door, there is nothing in this world that he cannot do.
Yeah.
And there may be a listener today who is going through some kind of trauma in their life, who feels at the bottom, who is ready to give up. And I just want to say, don't give up and don't allow fear to paralyze you, but rather get up.
Yep.
Choose faith, and God will be with you and see you through.
Amen. That's like the theme behind the book. Exactly. It's amazing. That story is so powerful. Every time I hear it, hits me every time. Thank you so much for sharing that. One of the things that I believe is central to the Watoto ministry is change. And I've noticed that Pastor Gary and Auntie Marilyn, you're not afraid of it. You're not afraid of change. So many of us stick to the way things are done. We do this way, and this is how we do it, and this is how we shall always do it. But change has been central, like a theme, weaving through the ministry. And one of those was the church changing from being program-based to cell-based. And I would just love to know how, Pastor Gary, how you came round to that, how you actually heard God telling you that, no, you can't do this way. You can't pastor all these people. We would love to hear it from you.
All your favorite topics, with a bit of a kick. Only on Power FM.
It's all about love on Power FM 104.1. Eki and Belinda on Kickstart this morning, and we have Pastor Gary and Auntie MARILYN Skinner in the studio, and we have been talking about so many things. Yeah, if you've just joined us, you are so welcome. You are not too late to hear the amazing stories that they are sharing. And just before we went into a bit of a break, we were looking at change being like a theme weaving through, the ministry, and the fact that we admire the way that Pastor Gary and Auntie MARILYN were not afraid to actually embark on change in different ways, and not to get so comfortable and fail to hear God when he's saying it's time to shift gears, And so one of those was going from a program-based church to a cell-based church. And I would love to hear from you, Pastor Gary, how you came to that decision.
Well, we were growing as a church, and I knew that we could grow to a certain point that we couldn't manage pastoring people, doing lots of things. So one day Jesus said to me, he said, "So who do you think you are anyway?" And I said, "I don't understand." He said, "You think you pastor these thousands of people?" We had about 5,000 people coming to church. I said, "I do." And then he said something that changed my life. He said, "Nobody can pastor more than 10 people. Even my son Jesus only pastored 12. Who do you think you are?" And I realized we were to be a small group church. And small group churches had started in different parts of the world, especially from South Korea, and their church had grown to be hundreds of thousands of people. And the way you manage hundreds of thousands of people or a big church is break them down into small groups and care for small groups. And we began to embark on that. And so change is not something that you should resist. Change is something you should welcome, because change takes you to a better place, to something new, to something innovative. Change is something that we have to get used to. And if you don't change, you're going to get stuck and lost. So we began to embark on that. We decided to transition the whole church at once. I taught for a whole year and a half on small groups and caring for people and how we love in communities, in small groups. And then we launched, and there were about 750 people who took the training. About 250 ended up after a year. And we launched 250 cells, and it just began to take off. And one of the things about that was that not only were you able to pastor tens of thousands of people, but you were also to get tens of thousands of people involved in their community. And our small groups now reach community, and it's a powerful tool to reach the hurting, the poor, the vulnerable of our community. The other thing was that we began to train leaders. Every cell has to have a leader. Every leader has to have an intern leader. So one cell becomes 2 cells. 2 cells becomes 4 cells. This multiplication of leaders meant that we needed to really be a church that focused on leadership. And God made this very plain to me. As I was pastoring this church full of young people, that the goal was to raise the next generation of African leaders that would transform their community, their city, their nation, their continent. We need a new Africa. The way that we do it is raise leaders with a kingdom culture of leadership. And I was to model that. How do we to multiply that? Through our small groups. Same with the children. When God told us to look after the children, God showed me that it wasn't about rescuing children. It was about raising leaders. So that we can do what? Rebuild our nation.
That's right.
So even small groups, even though it was about pastoring a large church, it was really about national transformation through the culture of Christ, the character of Christ, and the kingdom of the culture being put into the lives of so many people.
Wow.
Changed everything about who we are.
Yes. And still talking about change, I know you've mentioned about the child care, but something that actually I think many of us struggled, me inclusive, was the change from Kampala Pentecostal Church, because I joined. Yes, because I think I joined KPC in 1997, 96, 97 years, that time, and been with the church. Now, when you are changing the name, wondering what is happening. Why are we being called children?
And the famous speech, the church I see. Yes.
You know, it's amazing. I'm shocked at how many people have told me that they struggled with that name change.
Yes, I did.
It's a demonstration of what you've said. People don't like change.
Yeah.
They like to leave things the way that they are. There were a number of reasons. One of the reasons was that by then we were rescuing the children and we'd sent them out on choirs. And today we've sent over 120 choirs around the world. And they became very well known around the world and sang in the White House, sang in Buckingham Palace, sang in parliaments around the world, but tens of thousands of churches. And people started coming to Uganda to help us build. Sponsors of children wanted to meet their sponsored children, and they asked them at the immigration, so where are you going? Why are you here? They would say, well, we're going to that church where the Watoto are. So we became known as that Watoto church.
Yes.
And I recognize that was one reason that we changed the name. But the other was, and I don't even like to say this, but it's true, that even the name Pentecostal was not really held in high esteem.
Yes.
Those churches were considered a little bit crazy, over the top.
Biwempe.
Speak strange languages.
Parents didn't want their children going to those Pentecostal churches, so it wasn't beneficial to be called a Pentecostal church. It branded us. The church is much more than Pentecostal. It's the body of Christ. And so we felt a name change would actually be good for us. The other thing was, we knew eventually that we would start a church in Gulu. How do you have Kampala Pentecostal Church Gulu or Kampala Pentecostal Church Mbarara? So
or Ginger.
It was a God thing, and it was a step forward for us.
Wow. It's amazing. You've spoken a little bit about the children's choirs, and I want to just touch on the birth of childcare, because I've heard you talk about the time when there was an outbreak of HIV in the early 80s, and it ravaged many nations, but Uganda was one of the top most ravaged nations by HIV. And this, of course, led to lots of kids being orphaned, lots of women being widowed and all that, and lots of grandparents suddenly becoming parents of young children again. And I would love to know how the idea for childcare came about, because you say that God said it shouldn't be an orphanage, an institution. It should be a family, like a family unit. How did that idea come about for you?
Well, God one day said to me, Jesus one day said to me so clearly, Gary, I want you to look after my children.
Yes.
He didn't say the children, he said my children. I knew instantly that it was the orphan children, because Uganda had at that time the highest number per capita of orphans in the world. And I resisted it. I didn't want to do it. And then Jesus said to me, I didn't send you to Uganda to do what you want. I sent you to Uganda to do what I want. I began to understand from the scripture that his heart was not for the rich and the famous and the popular, and for he was broken by the needs of every single person's pain and the wounds. He took me to the scripture where it says that the father of the fatherless, the defender of the widow, is he in his holy dwelling place. He sets the lonely in families. And God said, I don't want you to build an orphanage. I want you to put these kids into families, in homes. He took me to the New Testament, James chapter 1, verse 27. The kind of religion that God the Father accepts as pure and faultless is this, to look after widows and orphans in their affliction, and to keep yourself from being polluted by the world. And he began to revolutionize my thinking as a pastor about who I was to reach, how we were to act as a church. We were to find the hurting, we were to find the vulnerable, and we were to love them and care for them. And that has become the culture of Watoto Church. It's not just about building a big church full of people with great sermons, lights, smoke, thunder for music. It's about raising up a generation of young Africans who will care about others.
Yes.
In the book, there's a quote: "The church is only the church when it cares for those for others, for other people. When we focus on others, we are here to serve Kampala." To serve the people of Kampala, not be a big church, be famous, be popular, get rich. It's about, and that's the heart of Jesus. It revolutionized who we are. So it was about caring for the widow. Now the women the most vulnerable women.
Neighborhood. Yes.
And that's the culture of who we are as a church. All of this, of course, is captured in the book.
Yes,
I tell
absolutely.
the story of how this happened. And it's just an amazing story of what Jesus has done. I couldn't have done this on my own. It had to be something that he spoke to us. Couldn't have done it without Marilyn. Could not have done it without a church full of people who heard the vision and said, we're going to follow what this pastor is leading us into.
Yeah.
And I wanted to model that with humility and with integrity and with excellence. And I think we've done that.
Yes.
So it's not about our name, it's not about our fame, it's not about our popularity, it's not about money or any of those things. It's about making Jesus famous by helping the hurting and the wounded and the poor. You know, sometimes people say, oh, that rich church with the, you know, the Watoto pastor.
Yes.
You know, but no, we're not known as that anymore. We're known as the church that loves community. We celebrate Christ, we care for community.
Interestingly, yesterday I took a boda and the gentleman was so I told him I work at the church, and so he was like, I've noticed the works of the church. I know that I'm not saved, I'm not a Christian, but I am watching. I watch you, and I see the works that you do, the way you impact community, and I, even if I came there and I gave my money, I know it would be utilized well. And I was proud. I was like, well, I'm inviting you. Please come and worship together. Like,
and that's what it's all about.
Like, yes, absolutely. We'll be hearing shortly from Auntie Marilyn on the inception of neighborhood very quickly, and then we shall have a chat on the handover and transition. Power 104.1 FM, all about love. The interesting conversations that we have that unbeknownst to you.
You have to throw that in,
Eki. But it is Belinda and Eki and Pastors Gary and Marilyn. At some point, I think somebody called you Garylyn.
Yeah.
And they're in studio, and lovely to hear, you know, just the story and just encouragement through. But Auntie Marilyn, please let us know on your share on your thought processes, on your conversations with God that led to the birth of neighborhood, the neighborhood model, and the idea of supporting helpless mothers to live with dignity and take care of children.
Well, you know, as Gary talked, AIDS was so bad. Parents were dying. Children were left without parents. And we prayed, oh God, would you do something about the AIDS crisis in Uganda? And whenever you call on God, he answers. Sometimes he doesn't answer the way we think he will, but he answers. And antiretroviral drugs became available either for free or for a very low cost. And so people had access to their antiretroviral drugs. And you know what the miracle is? There were far fewer orphans because mothers were staying alive a lot longer. But the type of life they were living was very, very difficult. And I remember like laying in bed one day, and again I heard the voice of Jesus, sweetie. And I say, there's only two people in this world that call me sweetie, Gary and God. And Gary was away, so I knew it was God. And I felt God say to me, sweetie, don't get too comfortable. You know, it's dangerous when you get comfortable.
Yes.
You can actually fall asleep to greater need. And sadly, I had gotten comfortable looking after AIDS orphans because, you know, I knew how to organize food for them. I knew how to train mothers. I knew how to arrange teams to come over and build houses. I knew how to train choirs to go on tour. I was actually comfortable. And he said, I've got something else I want you to do. And these words just slipped into my spirit. I want you to restore dignity to Uganda's most vulnerable women. You know, I believe, and I still believe it today, that Uganda's greatest resource is not the oil that we found in northern Uganda. It's not whatever resource may be buried under the soil, but I honestly believe that Uganda's greatest resource is her women waiting to be empowered. I mean, United Nations has proven that. You empower women, poverty can be eradicated.
You empower a nation.
It literally empowers a nation.
Yes.
So, you know, you have to have a strategy if you're going to do that. You don't just all of a sudden go out and say, okay, I'm going to empower women now. So I'm like, God, how are we going to do this? I need a strategy. I need a plan. Gary got the strategy for the childcare: rescue a child, raise a leader, rebuild a nation. I'm like, okay, God, I like the letters to all be the same. Could you kind of do that? And I was laying in my bed, and 3 words slipped into my mind: embrace, empower, and engage.
Yeah.
And I realized that God was calling me to embrace these women. And I looked the word up. What does embrace actually mean? Because I always thought it just meant to give a hug. And I learned that embrace meant a whole lot more than just giving somebody a hug. Because the truth of the matter is, a woman who's been abandoned, HIV positive, can't send her children to school, can't get medicine, can't afford to buy the medicine, can't feed herself. A hug, what's that going to do? Oh, I'm going to give you a hug. Bye,
Jesus loves you.
That wasn't going to work. Embrace actually means to accept and support someone just the way they are. And I realized that God was calling me to give them support. Make sure they had clothes. Make sure they were able to send their children to school. Make sure that they had food to eat. Make sure they had access to medicine. But then I also realized handouts do not work.
Nope. Yeah.
All handouts do. That's the problem with Africa. We'd be recipients of handouts for too long.
Give me.
You know what works? A hand up.
Yeah.
And I felt God was saying, I want you to empower them. Give them a hand up. How do you empower them? You have to teach them how to live a sustainable life of dignity. We had women, 1,000 women that could not even read or write their own name. You asked them what time it is, they couldn't tell you because they didn't know how to tell time with a clock. So we began to teach them how to read. We began to teach them how to write. Amazing. We began to teach them how to make things with their hands, all kinds of things. Skill, we put skills into their hands. But before we did that, we had to teach them that they were valuable and precious, because you can't empower someone who doesn't believe in themselves. If you're going to be a truly empowered person, you have to actually believe that you have something to offer. So we helped them to realize that they were precious in God's sight. I took a 10,000 shilling note, a dirty one, and I was in the mud, and I had stepped all over it and crumpled it all up, and I held it in one hand, and then I had another brand new 10,000 shilling note. And I asked the ladies, what's going to buy you more at the market? Both are going to buy you exactly the same.
Yeah.
It's just this one has been through situations and circumstances that this one hasn't. And I helped them to realize that they were valuable and precious and could do something. So we empowered them with skills training, and we empowered them by helping them to believe in themselves so that they could go back and be engaged in the lives of their children, engaged in the life of their community. And today we have thousands of women who aren't having handouts. They're now actually helping their own communities. They've become pillars in their community. We have former Living Hope neighborhood women who have run for government, the lowest level of government. We have women, I hear stories all the time. They've bought land, they built a house. They are now, actually helping their other relatives. So the neighborhood story is a success story of what God can do with something that seems to be nothing. And make something out of it.
So inspiring. And they make such amazing things.
Beautiful.
Really beautiful stuff out there. Yeah.
And I refuse to accept substandard things from these ladies. Yeah. Because I had to instill in them a spirit of excellence. I said, hey, we have to make quality things that people in America or anywhere are not going to buy because they feel sorry for you,
but because they really love them.
And it's quality.
Exactly. Eki, we need to get into something interesting over here.
That's right.
Which is the handover and transition of the church. Now, let's just talk about that for a moment. One thing I heard endlessly in February last year was that the amazement that Ugandans had, marveling over the fact that founders of a church would actually just hand it over, would hand it over. And not to their children, and choose to willingly step aside, to someone who they had mentored, in Pastor Julius and Vanita, people who you had walked with and mentored, and then you just hand it over to them and tell them, continue the journey, continue the journey. And stepping down, I know, is not easy, especially after putting putting blood, sweat, and tears into the ministry. It's not easy at all. So it's something people just couldn't wrap their heads around. They were waiting to see if it would actually happen. Then it did. It happened. So I'd love to know your thought process as you came round to deciding that this is the time that we need to hand over the mantle.
Well, it's very interesting. Transition is inevitable. It is going to take place. Either it can take place when it's been planned and prepared for, or you can get hit by a truck or something bad happens and you've got to transition. People often ask me, when did you start to think about transition? And I tell them, the first day we started Watoto Church, Kampala Pentecostal Church, was the day I knew one day I would have to transition. So when I hit about 55 years of age, I began to talk to the pastors of the church, and he said, you know what? We need to be thinking about what happens when I can no longer pastor this church. We need to think about succession. They said, oh no, it's too far away. We can't talk about, and they're uncomfortable with it. I said, no, we have to talk about it. And then we talked with the leadership of the church, and we came up with a formula that when I hit 65 years of age, that we would begin the handover, to hand it over to Julius. And then when I was 70, we would have the official handover. So we worked towards that, and we did that. We have to recognize the fact that these are our sons and our daughters. Julius, our spiritual sons and daughters, and handing it to them was not a risk, because we knew who they were, and we knew they'd carry on, and they wouldn't just abandon us, they would continue to love us, and that's been demonstrated to be true.
At some point, you'll probably hear Pastor Gary Skinner singing.
I love that song. It's all about Jesus.
It's such a beautiful song, and he did it at when we were at Watoto Church, Chengera, and it's a song that is very dear to his heart. And
but all others,
I am tempted to set him up, but I will not. I will set you up. But if you're just joining in, it is Belinda, Eki, Pastors Gary and Marilyn. It's now 10 minutes past 9 a.m. and this is Kickstart. We were talking about transition.
That's right.
And Belinda.
Pastor Gary, one of the things that I did say before the news was that people couldn't wrap their heads around the idea of you handing over a ministry that you had put blood, sweat, and tears into, and you highlighted the fact that you were handing it over to people you had mentored. You were sure they were going to.
It was not a mistake.
It wasn't a mistake, and you were sure they were going to carry it on. So now that you have actually handed it over, and it is flying, not coasting, but flying. The ministry is doing well. There's a lovely quote by Rick Warren that says, faithful servants never retire. You can retire from your career, but you'll never retire from serving God. And I know that you and Marilyn are serving all over the world. You're on platforms all over the world. And we would love to know, as Eki and I are going to be like clingy children right now, like, will you still be around? Will we still see you? Will you still be around? Will Uganda still be your home base? What's next for you?
The fish eagles read.
Yes.
We have a beautiful small home on the lake at Kawukubunga, and we love being there, and it's got a nice little swimming pool. It's not a fancy home, it's not a huge home, but it's just what we need to get old and retire, and one day I'm going to go to heaven. That's the way God works things out, and I would be happy to be buried in Uganda.
Wow.
And because this is home, we have spent more time in Uganda than anywhere else, and we love Uganda. We love the people of Uganda. We love the youth and the children of Uganda. We love this great church. We believe that God has a wonderful future for this church. Canada is nice, only in the summertime. So we go back there. We have a small little house that we have, a cottage on the edge of a lake too, and it's only a summer house. We can't stay there all year. So our plan is to continue to be in Uganda.
Amazing. And I know that we talked about transition a bit, but I would like to just take you back on that. You did not struggle with handing over. Because the thing in Africa and most of our Ugandan places, even businesses, people struggle to hand over. Could you just say a little more on handing over?
Yeah. Well, I'm not here for me. I'm not here to have power or to make money or to become famous and popular. I'm here to serve the people of Uganda. And what's best for the people of Uganda? What's the best for the nation of Uganda? That we raise up a generation of new leaders. And you can't raise them up and not give them an opportunity to use their leadership. And you don't have to wait until you're dead or so old that you can hardly move. I can continue to be around and be a support. I can continue to serve the leadership of this church. I can still be useful. I will always be who I am. Marilyn will always be who she is. I have an apostolic ministry. I'm a visionary. I'm a dreamer. I'm an inspirer. I can see something in young people and train them. I can still use those skills without being the person who makes all the decisions.
Yeah.
And so we are here for one reason, to serve God, and we do that by serving the leadership of this church, even though we don't lead it any longer.
Wow, that's powerful. Marion, you wanted to add to that?
Well, we told God, February 23rd, 2023, we don't need a platform anymore. We're actually not looking for a platform. What we're looking for is an open door. And the other side of that open door is our platform. So today, this is an open door that has come up.
Oh, yeah.
This is our platform, sitting with you,
wow,
sitting with Belinda.
Yeah.
And we have strength still. We have made ourselves available to God. We've made ourselves available to the Holy Spirit. We will do whatever you want us to do. Before we came to Uganda, when I was 15 years old, I used to sing a song, Jesus use me, and oh Lord, don't refuse me. For surely there's a work that I can do. And even though it's humble, help my will to crumble. Though the cause be great, I'll work for you. And at 70 years of age, that is the same prayer that we're praying today.
Wow.
Amen.
That's powerful. Pastor Gary, you are a father now. Your children have grown old. You're with grandchildren. Are you at great grandchildren now also?
Well, my oldest grandson is 22. So
who knows? Sometimes.
Anytime.
I am a young father, and thinking about just joining this church. I know I joined through my sister Esther. She brought me for Heaven's Gates and Hell's Flames, and I've never been the same after that. So I've stayed here. But Father's Day is when the season of Father's Day, and as Pastor Gary, you've placed emphasis on the importance of fathers and being active in the lives of their children. You've actually spoken about being in the line of preachers. I think you're in the fourth or third generation pastor. Fourth. All right. And the Watoto family has had such fond memories. I do remember Jaja Bob in amazing. We would just welcome us and then would just chat with us. But what legacy would you say your dad left for you that you'd want to pass on to your children or your grandchildren as well? And I know I'm also part of those children. Yes.
My dad believed in me. I didn't always believe in myself, and I wasn't the brightest student, the best student. I wasn't always the best sportsman. I didn't do bad, but I wasn't the best. But my dad was always there to put his arm around my shoulder and say, I'm proud of you. You've done well. You're my son. And I would travel with my dad when he would go to preach in rural areas in South Africa where we were living. And I watched his life and I was just proud of who he was. And it was part of the inspiration for me wanting to be a good husband, a good father, and a good leader. And by the goodness and the grace of God, he's allowed me to be a father, raise my sons, now a grandfather, and who knows, maybe a great-grandfather. But the great joy for me is to also be a spiritual father to tens of thousands of young men and young women. And I wish I could put my arm around the shoulder of every single one of them and say the same thing. God has a plan and a purpose for your life. You're a good person. With Jesus, you can do great things. Go for it.
Wow. I do remember some of those words when I was in Sylvia and when you'd come to visit and I was in transition. I was actually at that point where God was saying, your time here is done. And I sat down with you on that slope and just asked you, what does God have in plan for me? And I remember you saying those things. God has a plan for you. Stick by him and follow him and walk with him. And this is such an amazing experience for me. I would like to hear, even as we wind up our conversation, from Auntie Marilyn, if there are any things that you'd like a message that you'd like to leave with us, and then also hear from Pastor Gary. I like the don't touch God's girls, God's gold, God's glory. But I do remember that clearly. Yes.
I think one of the most powerful things, Aki, that you can live your life by is found in Proverbs. I think it's Proverbs chapter 3. And this is what I said to Bernita when I was putting a necklace around her neck on the transition day. And it's let love and loyalty never leave you. Bind them around your neck and write them on the tablets of your heart.
Yes.
Then you will receive a good name and favor. In other words, then you will prosper with both God and man. So to anybody listening out there, I would say, be a lover. Be a lover. Love God, love yourself, love people, but also be loyal wherever God has planted you.
Wow.
Amen to that. Eki has spoken about impact. Yeah, you have impacted people that you'll probably never even meet. Yeah, it's amazing. We all have our Pastor Gary and Auntie Marilyn's stories. I actually remember you joining my husband and I in holy matrimony in 2007. Can you imagine? It was back then. That's right. And it was so long ago. When I think about it, I even get emotional about it. But you have been a father figure and a mother figure to me since I was 10 years old. Yeah. And so I'm so grateful for you. You have left an amazing legacy for your biological children and grandchildren, but for us as well. Yeah, for us as well. And so when you call Uganda your home, it warms our hearts. Yeah, it warms our hearts, and we know that Papa and Mama will always be here with us. And we have spoken so much about your book, and we do have to encourage people to buy it.
Yes,
we do have to encourage people. You can still pre-order. People have been pre-ordering since the 1st of June. But this book will be available to you physically on the 20th of June. All you have to do is go to www.watotochurch.com/Gary Skinner book to make your order today. And they'll be available at Watoto Church for pickup. There'll be some copies at Power FM as well, and at the different celebration points of Watoto. And the book launch event is coming up. Yes, this Thursday. And you need to be part of this experience. I know it's going to be amazing. This Thursday, the 20th, 6 p.m. The entrance is absolutely free. You don't have to pay anything. Come with someone and let's celebrate this book together. Yeah.
Wow. I would like to say a big thank you to Pastors Gary and Marilyn. I don't know if you have any regrets over your time, over your moments in life. But yeah.
No regrets.
No regrets.
I preached recently, just last week, from Psalm chapter 7, I think it is. 71, verse 18. Now that I'm old and gray, do not forsake me, God, until I tell the next generation of your marvelous deeds.
Wow.
I regret nothing. I've made mistakes, but those mistakes I've learned through them, and they've made me better. I've had the most amazing woman walk beside me, give me the most amazing children, grandchildren, and she's been faithful and loyal, and I'm so proud of who she is and what God has allowed us to do. We didn't do it, He did it, but He used us, and for that we're so thankful.
Amen. We have a message from Patricia who says, my dad is celebrating 40 years in salvation. He was baptized by Pastor Gary, and he's been able to serve with PAG because of many lessons and inspiration he got from Pastor Gary and Marilyn. God bless you.
Hi people, there are going to be onions in studio. So we're going to be tearing. Otherwise, we'd like to say thank you. I love you. We love you. The impact that you have in our lives is such an amazing impact.
Thank you, and God bless you at Power FM as you tell the good news of Jesus.
Amazing.
Amen.
You are tuned into the station that's all about love.
Dude, I listen all the time.
It's just good song after good song.
No artificial additives, all natural ingredients. Power 104.1 FM.